We're recording, ready to go. We are all 7 here in person, which is very exciting. Happy New Year, all. Good to go into the next new year. With some continuation of some topics we've been working on. So in order to exit the building in the event of an emergency, we go out that door and in either direction, either down the stairs or stay at the top of the elevator in the area of refuge and wait for someone to rescue you. Open to the public for items not related to the agenda. Do we have anything? Or if you're joining us online, you would unmute and unvideo or revideo. We have any? It's just us. Okay, not hearing anything, so let us move on to announcements and staff report.
Did you do additions, changes to the agenda?
Oh, no, I didn't. So I do have a suggested addition to the agenda. Would it make sense to do it under other business?
Yes.
Under other business, just a recap on the capital improvement plan processing and warning. It's just an update. Anything else for the agenda? Okay. Announcements. I last week participated in a very nice little coordination meeting about the open space and parks plan with the other committee chairs and got an update from staff. So we'll be just mainly about coordination and kind of the update on how it's going and some of the final content coordination. So it seemed like it was nice. There was a general suggestion to consider the possibility of having one plan because there's so much overlap between the parks and the open space. I think that's something that we had kind of talked about a little bit about how it was hard to separate them. So that was one kind of major thing, and a discussion about kind of how some of the mapping was going to be kind of incorporated to it. So not a giant content update.
Does it have any sort of final views on any subject, or was just?
No, it wasn't with the consultant. It was really more about like internally, how are we coordinating with the different committees that kind of have.
Do you know when they're going to deliver that?
That was part of it, just.
I mean, it was supposed to be December the 15th or something like that, but.
Yeah, so I think what I can say, because Councillor Smith shared this last night, that to do all of the elements in the way that our community expects to do it, it's going to be a little bit of a longer process than previously envisioned. And so I think that, that's what Councillor Smith had shared, is that this group had discussed that there are elements of this that are too important to have time be the precedent over quality. So he said that the coordination group is going to spend a little bit of time sort of working out what needs to be completed in order to wrap up this plan in the way that this community deserves it too. So update to come, but not a immediate timeline to be known right now.
Any other announcements from anybody? Yeah.
I just want to report that City Council passed the budget after a public hearing last night. Do you want a quick rundown on what's in that budget?
Or is that under the business item?
Okay. Part of the money in there is.
For
Okay.
That sounds great.
There's money for these new stipends that we introduced this year, right? For next year. We're maintaining our general fund support for community justice centers. We've got a new contract for community outreach for the police with the Howard Center. We've increased our tree care by $16,000. We're going to have a new economic director, new position, and also a new position for the public works staff to support city center and cemeteries. We did challenge all the department heads to decrease their budgets by 5% in order to come in with a low increase. And then they align their budget lines with the actual spending for the prior year. And we're going to go to AI generated minutes a year from now. And we also set to zero the social service funding in lieu of probably a change using the opioid directive settlement funds. And we also use some one-time funds. And so that'll result in a 3.3% tax rate increase for just the municipal side. And the average condo should see an increase about $53, the average house $78 for the year. That doesn't take into account those homes that are income, sensitive, or the ones that aren't. That's just an average. We also passed utility rate increases for both water and sewer because of all the construction with the Bartlett Bay bond issue, right, and also the water tanks. And that's about it. So the ballot language is set. There was one typo where it said 90 instead of 90. But we settled that, so please remember to vote on March 3rd or get your absentee ballot.
3.2,
3.3.
3.3, very good.
We will meet with the school on the 21st in the steering committee meeting and hear what their budget is. They're supposed to settle that tonight as well. They're seeing a proposed budget, and hopefully they'll bring forward something for us on the 21st. And then both city and school will present both those budgets, and then that's what we're going on.
I'm guessing you're just looking with a 3.3.
There were some numbers thrown around, but I'll just wait for you to find out what it is. That's all, thank you.
Great, thanks. Other announcements? Any staff items?
It's 2026. Do you see any typos from me that say 2025? That's a typo. I know this about myself. I will write 2025 for probably the next 3 months. So
Yeah, me too.
I found a little tiny.
did I write 2025? That's
No,
oh,
it just was a missing word.
well, I'm not talking about general typos.
Yeah, those are different.
Anyway,
The only thing I'll add is that, you have been doing a lot of work, already on the subject of Act 250 Tier 1A status. We, have, started, we organized and then had our kickoff just this week of a peer group, of other communities that are interested, that are likely advancing. And so right now there are, I believe, 8 communities around the state in 4 different counties that have, that are participating in this, that are very seriously looking at doing it in the next 8 to 12 months. So, it's gonna be really interesting for us to hear, both, what are they learning from this process? What are they hearing locally? And then, to work together on submitting quality applications. And really success in this is really not just one community having this, but many communities doing it in parallel in ways that meet their own needs. So it's exciting.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
That is great. Okay, we can move on to item 5, which is the Bedrock removal noise regulations, which is an updated draft. We do have a memo in the packet, which includes some specific changes, based on kind of our discussion and some of the decisions we've made on the December 2nd, meeting. What is really interesting, because in my notes here, I say December 2, 2026. I was ahead of the game. Crazy me. It was 2025.
No.
And so the staff memo kind of lays out a pretty clear specific changes that we had requested at the time, and then also has some more information about the noise ordinance or the nuisance ordinance. I don't know if people have some specific items they want to talk over in the memo before we get into the draft language specifically.
I have in a few notes to Paul and you and
Yeah, you have some typos, so or not typos, but like language
Yeah.
changes. So before we get to language changes, how about, does anyone have anything related to the the nuisance ordinance? We had those questions. Did the memo kind of answer the questions. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it did answer the question. My takeaway is that, yes, by codifying what we're proposing, we're essentially eliminating the city's ability to use the nuisance ordinance. Or at least make it extremely difficult. So I think we need to keep that in mind as we move forward with the language here, that this really is the first and last line of defense.
Yeah, I think unless someone's doing something outside of their approval and then they're outside of an approval.
Yes.
and That's the nuisance. At that
Yeah,
point.
But if we've given them the permit under this, then
Right.
we have
Okay.
largely given away our ability to come back later and say, no, that's too much.
Then do folks want to just jump into the language? I know Michael did say he had some items.
Yeah, there are language items,
Are we ready to go into language items?
Sure.
Great.
Page 10 of page 10, it's section B2 where we say they can operate from 8 AM to 5 PM. I would like to add that that's weekdays. Weekends and public holidays are out. Because that's the time when families are out, weekends. Children are out playing in the garden, going to the parks, but it's not a good idea to have, 120 decibels of racket going on. While people are trying to enjoy the weekend, during the week, fine, folks are working, kids are at school. But I think it's important to exclude public holidays and weekends.
Do you?
Right, moment.
Yeah.
Okay, so wrong document.
Page
Which
It's
section?
page 3.
page 10 of the,
Yeah, I don't
ordinance.
have it that way.
I'm looking at the draft of red line is page 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Hang
got
on
it there.
just a moment.
So. Under B2, you
Yep.
wanted to include
I wanted
after
to,
8 AM to 5 PM,
Monday to
Right.
Friday,
Monday through Friday.
Oh, is this?
and weekends
It's
and
under.
public holidays excluded.
1605B2.
It actually, there's two, it appears.
Oh, yeah, there's 2 places where.
Are those federal holidays, state holidays? They're different.
Well, public holidays that are observed here, I guess.
Do we have other places in the regulations where we have that time frame? Where we don't have weekend work? I mean, it is common, we see that in my projects, like permits or approvals will give a not on holidays.
I mean, there's lots of weekend work that's not disturbing.
No, I mean, so if we wanted to do this, we would have the language be the same and use like public holidays or
Mhm.
bank holidays. I don't know what we would call, like if we have a precedent for like some kind of holiday exclusion. Or anything.
no. No, I just searched for the word holiday in the LDRs just to make sure, and it does not appear.
I guess one other question. The noise ordinances, I don't believe reference day of the week, they're just time of day.
Mhm.
Currently.
We only looked into this afternoon with Michael's question. We did do a couple of spot checks of Act 250 decisions where blasting specifically. And in those ones, we did find a couple of examples where they excluded Saturdays, Sundays, and federal holidays. That's the way that they framed it.
And this would just be for the blasting Right.
No, I think it would have to be for jackhammering.
or hydraulic jackhammering and blasting.
And so in this first section, it would be to be de minimis. You would have to be only hydraulic jackhammering, not exceeding 40 hours. And not outside of the hours of 8 to 5 on a weekday. So if you want it to be considered de minimis, In this section, that's what the effect is. If you want to be considered de minimis, you can't do any work on the weekend or on a federal holiday.
I
The
guess
other section's slightly different, but
part of my concern, I do definitely hear the argument for not wanting to have it on the weekend. I guess I'm concerned particularly in the de minimis amounts. Like if you're doing weekend work construction, you find like a rock, yay big on Saturday morning. I worry if that's undue. I would that's an undue expense to like any contractor was like, okay, now it's got haul work the entire weekend because you have to wait 2 days to spend an hour to removing this one rock that we found on a Saturday morning. Like that's my concern. I hear why we wouldn't want to do that, but if it's like if it's unplanned, like, oh no, we just found a rock by mistake. I'm hesitant to ban on certain days. I guess if it's planned, like it's gonna be long term, yeah, you can plan around that, but I guess particularly to minimis, I'm a little concerned. I'm hesitant to limit it for that reason.
I mean, that's very hypothetical.
Oh, it's not hypothetical at all. I mean, you find little rocks that you weren't expecting all the time in construction, and people do construction work on weekends. Like it will come up. Like I don't think this is some weird, crazy hypothetical that someone might find a rock while digging on a Saturday.
Well, if they can dig it up, fine, but if they have to have it blasted or hammer it or jackhammer it, it should be done on a weekend.
Donna?
Stepping back just a couple of steps from where you are. I was looking into the submittal requirements and I don't see anything in here that says that it says that the bedrock removal plans must be prepared by a qualified professional, but
I think the ERB can.
And it says volume, location, and depth of excavation, location of any on-site processing. Where here does it say you have to actually designate where on the property excavation is anticipated? Is it clear from this that you need to show where the bedrock is located? And I'm kind of questioning this because on the Jam Golf property, it was actually the city, planning department or the reviewer actually put a requirement into the plans, which was adding a pathway, and it was right where the bedrock was. I mean, it was actually outcroppings. It wasn't even bedrock, it was outcroppings. And the city was proposing to put a pathway through there. And that bothered me because I said, okay, plans are not clear where the bedrock is and where these outcroppings are. It didn't accurately show where the trees were. There was a lot of destruction had that plan been followed. And I had not made a stink about it. That would have caused a lot of blasting. And that was a city added requirement. So I don't think if it was clear that there was a lot of rock there, that requirement would have been made. But I'm just questioning the clarity and accuracy of, submittals that are currently being reviewed by the city. And do you really know from those submittals, and is anything that we're asking for here making it more clear where you're expecting to see rock? Now, obviously, as Colin pointed out, there are things that you're going to find that you didn't know about. That happens all the time. But I'm not even seeing that what we're asking for here is a clear indication that there has been drilling or test bores done that indicates where and to the extent of how much bedrock there is.
Well, doesn't
Well,
F1 answer that?
Yeah, is that F1?
Is that not clear enough for you? You want more language?
That's not what it says. It says showing the property where bedrock removal is proposed. Okay, you have a 5-acre property and somewhere on there's going to be bedrock. That's what that says to me.
Showing where on
It
the
doesn't say
property?
specifically where.
in
The-
two, it
and the
says
extent,
location,
and
volume,
extent.
location, and depth.
of
And
excavation.
where,
Yeah.
where the removal is proposed, that's kind of the mapping of the,
I mean, it seems that way, but. I mean, I guess they're saying that you don't have to indicate everywhere where there's bedrock, just,
where you plan to
just,
move it.
just where you wanna be moving it.
Well, yeah,
That's what, I think that first sentence says so.
And
Because I think if
I'm-
they're not proposing to do anything with it, it would just be.
here's what I'm kind of getting at. It's just like, it seems almost backwards that nobody's doing test borings anymore. You know, you rarely will see test borings on properties. You know, back when I was doing architecture, we did them all the time, you know, because it was
Mhm.
Pennsylvania and there was a lot of rock everywhere. And same condition exists here. So engineers and designers are going into these projects, laying out properties without any idea of where the rock is, because they haven't done any test borings.
But if they need to comply with these 3 points, they have to map it.
Yeah, well, they do,
But
but
I
it
have
kind,
to
it
do
kind of
the-
goes back to the later paragraph. It says something about thoughtful design. Using thoughtful design, it's
to limit.
that's eight E. And I'm like, okay. I just want to know that this explicitly says, don't lay out your development until you know where you have bedrock. And I'm not sure if this says that.
Yeah, I don't think it does at all, but
Yeah, I don't read it as saying that it's required. That's all I'm thinking it should say. It's like, before you lay out your development, you should know where the bedrock is and try to avoid it. And be more clear about it. Yeah, because that's the problem with a
But
lot of
they would-
regulations. They're just not clear. And so people don't do it because it's not clearly stated. Anywhere that you need to know where the bedrock is and then you lay your property out around, you know, to try to avoid it.
I guess the question I had though, I mean, that definitely changes scoping. I see the argument, I mean, look, it sounds like you're suggesting is basically require, if there's a reasonable suspicion that there may be bedrock in the area, to do test borings.
Yeah, there's probably even modern ways to figure it out. You know, I don't even know if they have to do borings anymore. Maybe they have echolocation or.
In the
or
state, we still
something.
do that.
But
I can think of at least one project that they missed a giant concrete slab by a foot, and that caused $100,000 delay. I guess what I'm wondering though, is that
You should-
trying to say find all the bedrock before you build is easier said than done, because how many bores you kind of.
or maybe in preliminary plat or something like that. When you're doing preliminary plat, identify where you've got bedrock, you know, to the best of your knowledge. And, you know, I don't know, because I'm not an engineer, so I don't know what methods are out there to identify where bedrock. I mean, on Jam Golf, at least some of it is really obvious because it's sticking out of the ground. You know, it's a cliff. It's a small cliff, it's very rocky, and there's all the trees on the property are right where the rock is. You know, it's no accident that the trees are there. It's just because you can't do anything with that land. So proposing to put a path right in the middle of that was clearly, they just didn't know, they didn't understand what was on that property.
But that's not the developer. That
Well,
was the city.
yeah, well, which means that the documentation was lousy. It didn't show the correct trees. I mean, I had walked it and looked at what was submitted and I'm like, this bears no resemblance to reality. This is not what's there. And, you know, so I just think that there should be some better requirements that, you know, you have to submit an accurate site plan and show, you know, where trees, where rock outcroppings and where bedrock is located. Because without that, even the reviewers don't really know, you know, because they're not going out to the site and walking the site to figure out, like, you know, is this appropriate? And I think we get a lot of inappropriate development because somebody's just taking a stamp and putting house plans down without understanding at all what's on that land.
Well, what kind of language? I guess I definitely hear what you're saying. I guess I worry that having a fixed requirement to say you must do borings gets into it's a whole one piece of legislation.
I think you have to say the method, because that's usually, you don't want to tell a builder
Yeah.
what method to use. But, you know, I think it's a reasonable expectation to say, you know, whatever current method exists, you know, we want you to identify before doing, before going beyond preliminary plat, like where, where you're expecting to have bedrock encounters.
Are you talking about bedrock that's not meant that they're not gonna remove?
Well,
Because
You
that's
don't-
what this is about. This
but
is
you don't have to remove it if you're not building on top of it. I'm just saying, if they don't know where it
Yeah.
is, they're gonna propose putting a building site on a
No,
site
but-
where,
But what that right there says, a map or plan showing the property where bedrock removal is proposed, so they. have
that's not
to
what
show
that says. It says that you're getting a site plan and you say there's bedrock somewhere on this property. That's what that says. It doesn't say you have to identify the locations of bedrock accurately.
No, it's
It-
it's
it
showing
does,
where
it
the
does.
action, where someone is proposing the action of bedrock. That's what that's.
I see how the grammar is a little ambiguous in that.
Yeah,
phrase.
it's
Then the
just-
second-
At least,
it's
I'm
the way-
not a lawyer, but it seems.
Take away some of the ambiguity. I didn't think we could, fix
But
the.
the
fix
second one
language
says
a
volume,
little bit.
location, and depth of excavation.
But does the excavation of bedrock,
Right,
or,
right.
yeah, we're never splitting hairs, but
It's,
Maybe it could be
It,
polished.
it could be bossed up a little bit, but I
I think you're just giving a lawyer some room to maneuver there by not being clear what you mean.
They're showing the property.
Well, what is the
and where bedrock-
language that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Work.
Exactly.
Well, I guess so it doesn't sound like you're even talking about bedrock to be removed. Like, are you talking about adding it to like a site plan submission? Because you're talking about bedrock that was hidden over in the woods that they weren't planning to do anything with. And then the city came in and said they want to put a path there, so it. Like, if they're not doing something in an area of the property.
Yeah,
Like, they're not doing something there. Like, why would they even need to?
Well, it looked like they made some effort to put the house plans, a little bit further away from that, just because there was a big drop off on the property in that area. So they avoided that.
Yeah,
But I mean, there's bedrock everywhere on that property. I mean, and the Jam Golf, I mean, that is ledge. I mean, a good bit of that site is ledge. And you still don't know where it is.
so are you, if,
But they have
mean, that
to
was
find
the-
out where it is.
Well,
But
but
to
Michael,
comply,
just back up one step.
yeah, no, let me finish. To
We should
comply
know
with
where
that
the
one
bedrock is
sentence.
before they lay out the house sites.
so
Yeah,
that's
that's
what
up to them.
8E, so I
It's
think,
not up to them. That's what creates all the noise because they're planning to build where there's a lot of bedrock removal.
so 8E.
But they have to show a
Is what
plan
we
where it
add.
is that they're gonna remove. They're gonna define it.
But just make it say that. Just
That's
make
what
it, it doesn't say that though.
It says here that you have to have a map or plan showing where bedrock removal is proposed. That's English for me. That says you have to show exactly where it is.
I lost it.
small proposed tweak in F1, you could remove the words the property. And that might be grammatically a little more clear.
Yeah.
Showing where bedrock removal is proposed.
Agree, yeah,
Where on the property? Just
Or
add,
just showing.
showing where
Showing
bedrock
where-
is.
Showing
If
it.
you want to show where it is,
they're
you
planning
can say you're
to
welcome
remove
to,
it.
but it's not relevant.
Yeah,
I like that.
showing
remove
where
the
on the
property.
property. So you add where and on.
No, you're
Yeah,
saying,
or
suggesting,
endorse the property.
in fewer words, a map or plan sheet showing where bedrock removal is proposed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That also works. Yes.
simple is best.
Okay.
Yeah, that
Okay,
feels.
so that seems good.
Okay.
Um,
That's a lot less ambiguous.
And then I think the second part of what you're talking about, I think is the 8E, where they need to kind of understand where the bedrock is so they can plan their design to limit unnecessary bedrock removal. So
Right.
that's how we put that in there. So it's not saying you have to do borings on 10-foot intervals, like it's not saying that, but it's saying, they need to be planning for it.
That I think does say what you intend.
I would note also that letter D also gives the board the authority to require as necessary.
So basically, if we suspect there's a lot of bedrock there, please figure it out, yeah.
Right.
Shall have the authority to compel a subsurface exploration.
So does AE give you, I know we talked about this at the last meeting where we discussed this, that we talked about basements. So, they want to put a building with basement in there, they have to blast all the bedrock. Does this give the DRB to say the authority, you shall not build a basement because it doesn't need to happen?
Or, I mean, they
Yeah,
usually, they're
I
usually.
think
pulling
this
plans out of
language
Books anyway,
is a
so
little
we
wishy-washy.
select one that doesn't need a basement.
Yeah, but my question is that something that's enforced? Can the DRB say to the developer, you guys want to put basements there, you can't because of the amount of bedrock there? Is that,
I think it might say that they don't get a lasting permit because they didn't use their thoughtful design. Maybe.
Well, they haven't been thoughtful enough.
I think that's
Hmm?
pulling out my dusty old DRB hat. I don't know that we would have swatted down an application based on this language. That we would have said, no, you can't have the basement, you didn't need it, you should have designed around it, you can't do it.
Right.
I don't think this gives enough authority to the DRB to really say that. They might make the power grab for it, but I don't think that's clear enough to tell the DRB that if you don't like the design, if you don't feel they did a good enough job, if they don't need a basement and they have one, you can strike that from their plan or deny it. I'm not sure that that's the guidance that the DRB would get in the middle of the meeting.
Yeah.
Well, how do you say
I
it?
think this is probably
Is
the
that
hardest.
what we intended? I mean, I would certainly like to have that come across to the
Yeah.
developer, that you need to plan this better to avoid all of these problems that you're generating with blasting.
Yes.
I guess the counterpoint comes when you have something where you have like apartment building that the basement's gonna be a car storage, and if they can't, get those extra 40 parking spaces below the building that had some bedrock in there. Like that feels to me more necessary than, oh, do you have a pool table in your basement? But then does the DRB get to decide what is necessary? Because it feels like, well, I'm trying to say some basements are more necessary than others, but I don't want to be the one trying to say which are which.
Is there a way to not use the term unnecessary? Cause I think that's really debatable. Is
Excessive,
it, yeah, or something, I mean, unnecessary, well, I wanna build a house with a basement, so. And basements are important.
I mean,
I can have a smaller, plot,
Well,
cause I'm going down as well as, I don't know, I mean, I just think unnecessary is. Would be difficult for the DRB to say, no, cause you're putting in a basement and we don't think that's necessary.
is there anywhere, if we move back up the ladder, is there anywhere in the plan that's submitted that would be fleshed out? In other words, they came and said, hey, we're gonna do 10 single family homes on this property with a ton of bedrock, and we wanna do all basements. Where does that conversation happen? The planning might go, or DRB might go, yeah, that's probably not a great idea. Or is
Well, and I think that's why we tried to put it in there, because the context of this section is balancing several objectives.
mhm.
The goal being how to have the minimal disturbance to achieve the product that the regulations otherwise allow, right? And so it's duration, level of noise, impact to the built environment, limit cost, and then unnecessary bedrock removal. And I think it's a very hard thing to write to capture all circumstances. And also to not put the DRB and the city in the position of, neighbor versus neighbor and arguing necessity of a specific thing, which then just puts the whole thing in the courts. About, how, taking an entire, neighborhood of 20 homes or 50 homes and bring it down to the question of a basement in one house. Because the question is really more about the overall development, and to not lose sight of that in the DRB's review. But this is a tricky one to write.
Didn't we put this in to incentivize?
On which house plan is
Are
going
you
on
done?
each lot.
She had her hand up and you didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't see your hand up.
Yeah.
Apologize.
But I mean, the builder often doesn't determine which house plan is gonna be used immediately. I mean, in some cases, perhaps they do. But there is some flexibility. I know in Village at Dorset Park where I live, all the houses that back up to the park, to the ball fields, all of those were different designs than anything else in the neighborhood because there was a lot of ledge right there. And, you know, Homestead determined right away that they had to put different plans in there so they wouldn't have to do much blasting because there were already plenty of houses in the neighborhood at that point. So I think a reasonable builder who has an architect on staff, which John Hausner was, you know, was able to make that decision at that point. It's like, we have to change our plans for these sites. And I mean, even in Burlington, you know, like, I think they ended up not putting the lowest level of parking in. You know, they ended up building the parking up levels instead of going down to the ground, because it was just gonna be too expensive to go down. So those decisions do happen. I just don't know if residential builders who kind of have this fixated idea that you have to have a basement in every house, that they're allowing themselves the flexibility to change house plans. Like that.
Michael and then Colin?
I thought we put this in because we were trying to incentivize developers to do a different kind of construction, like pole construction, and not require a full basement, or only require enough basement space or below grade space for utilities. Isn't that why we put this in?
It is, but I think what we're hearing is some people feel like it might not be strong enough language is.
You can't force a developer. I mean, if he's got his wits about him and he can build without blasting and removing bedrock, which is very expensive, more power to them. But I think this was just an idea that they should think about. Maybe we don't need a basement. Maybe we don't need to blast. Maybe there's another way of doing this. Unnecessary removal of bedrock. You know, that's.
Can we just take it unnecessary?
Yeah.
I mean, you might want to replace
Yeah, just
unnecessary
leave out
with
that
excessive.
If we took out
It
unnecessary.
feels like there's consensus around taking out the word unnecessary.
Well, the second one though, it may have to be excessive because the last sentence, any steps taken to avoid the removal of bedrock, that makes it like there's no bedrock. Or I guess you think to limit the removal of bedrock on the last line.
To limit, you know.
Yeah, you have to have the word limit back in again.
So
There's
we-
something else too, Colin?
Yeah, I guess it's more to, I guess all I want to say is just to reiterate the point that I definitely hear that this is not, it's a little weak to say, oh, you cannot have a basement with that, but I think it's just reiterating that like, it is a holistic process with a bunch of other points in there, and I think, I guess I keep going back to the worst case scenario that we hopefully, we already seen the worst case scenario of this with long drive, we're trying to avoid that. I guess I see in that sort of circumstance, you could just, it does feel just trying to say, hey, why the heck are you chipping here? Why aren't you just blasting here? Like, I'm not sure we're going to need to lean on E that much. It's more of a part of a multi-step process. And I think we need to keep in mind that like, I think it's easier to compel a developer to say, hey, can you please just use blasting instead of chipping versus remove an entire basement. And I like that the way it's currently written does give us that flexibility to sort of do the least difficult way to, whatever. I think my thoughts are getting too convoluted, but I think you get what I'm trying to say.
I think what you're trying to say is that it's part of the balancing test.
Yes.
It's not a standalone standard that says you must limit bedrock removal.
Yeah.
It's in the rest of the context of the other factors.
That,
that are
yes.
balanced.
Much better put than what I was saying. Yes.
And
Yeah, and
Paul?
go ahead, Donna.
Donna?
well, what Colin was just saying is the blasting may be a lot cheaper and easier to do in some respects, but we also have to remember in some cases, go back to Jam Golf, there's some valuable trees. And blasting tends to do a lot of damage to trees. And I think, usually usually you're supposed to limit excavation within the circle of, what it's called, but within the drip line. within the drip line and everything. But blasting goes well beyond that, because it's underground, it's affecting all the underground structures around it too, so. You know, it's like you can't really separate tree protection from you know, those two are kind of interconnected. And you just have to recognize that too.
Doesn't shipping also cause problems for utilities?
It's more localized, I think.
I guess it depends where they're connected. I know a firm is currently active in a lawsuit that shipping on an adjacent property destroyed her foundation. She's trying to sue them.
Well, blasting, I mean, you know, because I mean, we feel the blasting. I mean,
Sure.
I'm not even in an adjacent neighborhood. And when they blast up on the hill, we can feel it, you know,
Yeah.
I mean,
But it's
glasses shake and things like that in the house, but
regardless, it is still
mostly just a loud noise.
yeah, it is still a multi-part process. That like there's no there's no hard bans on anything here because
Right,
it's so site specific.
but yeah, I mean, no matter what you do, I mean, it's gonna damage something.
Yeah.
Is this the development where there was a court document that specified where the trees were and which ones had to be saved?
Or was that
And
another
I don't
piece of
think they
property?
complied, as I walked around there as well. Could I return
Well,
to something
they haven't done,
that was?
they haven't done anything.
Stay on this
Paul
topic.
wanted to say something about this language.
I guess the only thing I just wanted to make sure that, acknowledging the circumstances that have been shared in this meeting, the subject of bedrock removal can happen in all circumstances citywide. And so as we think about this language, I'm hearing what you're saying about basements. I also want to note that like Beta needed to be removing bedrock to have their, 100,000 square foot manufacturing facility. And putting that on more than one level is not really feasible. And so thinking about like this language applying in all circumstances, because the DRB doesn't get to pick and choose once this language exists, when to apply and when not to apply it. So as we've been thinking about like using this in the context of 5 considerations rather than a standalone, that's some of our thinking, is that the DRB will need to be nimble enough, have the power to appropriately regulate and be nimble enough to take everything from a basement to a, 100 and X thousand square foot facility for manufacturing and manage both of those through the same set of rules.
It's. And I absolutely agree with that. And along the same lines, is it worthwhile? Do we need to call that out more clearly? Because obviously the main concern, if you're working next to like a daycare center or a senior citizens home, is going to be different than if you're over at the airport.
Which is
So-
gonna have a daycare.
What's that?
There's gonna be a daycare in that facility.
Yes, but it's a much larger
Yeah.
area. But my point being, if you're in an area where there are no really close neighbors, the noise is not as much of an issue. So if the DRB is looking at this plan and everything's fine and they're gonna do some chipping, but the nearest neighbor is 500 yards away, then they might not care so much. If they're doing it in an area that's far more sensitive, then I would think they would weight the factors differently. Cost may be the predominant factor if none of the other factors are really terribly impact anyone. But if it's a great impact to the community, then I would think they would look at it and say, well, if you want to do it, you're gonna have to spend some more money to make this impact less.
Does 8C kind of address that?
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at, see,
Limit impact to built environment.
well, it says privately built features. I mean, like public infrastructure and privately built features, to me, that doesn't exactly say, oh, you're close to a neighborhood with, big, really nice houses and or poor houses, or affordable housing, you're right next to affordable housing, it's the same thing.
But it could potentially be a reason to not necessarily put the days of the week, because, if you are next to a daycare, but no houses, it might be better to do the work over the weekend. It's different parts of our city have different needs for when might be most appropriate, so.
And then that's what I'm just wondering, whether there's a place here for some language, just saying that the weighting of these different factors is not necessarily equal and is gonna have to be site specific. in order to minimize the worst impacts.
Do you think under 8 at the very top, like there's like in that initial sentence, like it could say, in their context or something, like, so you're kind of considering these 5 things within the specific context, which at the airport is very different than like in the middle of a neighborhood.
Physical context. It's a physical context.
Yeah,
You could have,
yeah.
could
Physical,
have different
yeah,
kinds of
physical context or
context
or location in the city, something like that.
Built environment.
It says balances the following objectives. Well, maybe we don't necessarily want to balance them. For each case, you want to address and minimize the most negative impacts.
addresses the following objectives, yeah. Yeah, balances seems to say, oh, well, some of these are more important than others, and it may change depending on where it is.
Like we stumped staff.
Yeah, like limit cost, maybe directly in opposition to design, which is, I doesn't happen.
Because it's true about the balancing. I mean, there's some things that we want to like specifically balance. There's some things that we want to like take in context. So,
It would be a preamble.
Yeah.
Taking into account
But
the context. the physical
getting back
context.
to just the exact language in E, are we agreed that you take out unnecessary on the first line and then on the
Yeah.
fourth line? To not avoid, but to, what was the word? again?
Limit.
Limit.
Basically, yeah, the exact.
to limit the,
I think just limit removal of bedrock,
Essentially the exact same phrase.
yeah,
Place.
right?
yeah,
Is
that's
that
what I
okay?
wrote down.
Does that work for you guys?
Yeah.
I mean, is that what we're trying to say?
Or maybe say to limit the quantity of bedrock removal, would that be a little more what the original intent was?
Development could be an enormous
The
amount.
impact
and
of bedrock
others
removal?
Just, 2 truckloads,
Yeah, because, yeah,
so the quantity.
well, I guess that's what I'm trying to say, so we're not trying to say you can or cannot put bedrock in, we're just trying to say, if you gotta do bedrock, can you do less bedrock is what we're trying to say.
And really you want to limit the impact of it.
Yeah,
Yeah, and maybe that's what it is. Maybe it should say limit impact of bedrock.
But isn't that what all the other ones are?
Yeah.
Isn't that all the other
Well,
ones are?
limit,
The other
yeah.
ones are the impacts of.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
the one
this
I
is-
want to be
this is the
made.
amount.
For the thoughtful design.
And we were trying to not do a
Move the amount.
specific amount because
Right.
this might apply to a singular building. It might apply to a 200-acre property. And so the amount is in the again, in the context. So we were trying not to say an amount because an amount just doesn't.
but can you see like
scale
the
well.
quantity in abstract terms, like just minimize how many you're putting in, we don't have like a number, but like just sort of say, hey, just try to figure out there's ways to remove how many cubic
Is-
yards.
So I guess the question we would challenge back to, is it truly the amount in all circumstances, or is it like, if you moved the road 7 feet to the left, you wouldn't need to do it in this section at all. So it's not really about amount, it's about like design
Yeah.
that doesn't necessitate it.
Yeah, I think that's.
Or like, I guess you
get
could
at.
have it be about the amount, but I think you're trying to balance like good design
Yeah.
also, right? So like,
Right.
do you want a bad design that has
Right.
Yeah,
or removed?
it's exactly
Well,
what Donna said, like, in her neighborhood, the one section just doesn't have basements because you'd have to remove bedrock, so they didn't put basements in that section, so that, like, the design, it's about the design.
Yeah, well, that was part of the difficulty of writing this, was that we were trying to write language that could refer to both the design of a structure and the overall layout of a structure within the context of the parcel on which it's located or structures.
Yeah,
In a way such that it obviates the need for bedrock removal.
Right.
if possible.
So.
Well,
do
Which might not be possible,
do you
but
think the second?
if it could be, that'd be, great. So.
Like the
you know.
second unnecessary should just stay in.
Or maybe go towards something more like, because again, these are the 5 things that they're saying their plan addresses as they're presenting this to the DRB as to why they should get approval. And basically just to show that the necessity of bedrock removal has been carefully considered and designed for.
Right. Which is why I think
And-
I think we should keep balances in there. Balances doesn't mean everything is equal. It's, you stack them up. You know, and some things have more weight. Whoops, I mean, just,
Yeah, I think you're right, John. It's to have the developer describe what are the things that they did to consider
mhm,
the alternatives. It's like an avoidance, like in wetland permitting, the avoidance. These are the things I did to try to avoid it. And look, I did do these non-basement ones and I did move the road over, but these ones I really just can't, you
right,
know. Really need this for the
Yeah, the mitigating.
whatever.
or, yeah, you can't have a manufacturing plant on 3 different levels.
And that makes sense. Like a hangar is flat bottomed. Like,
Right, doesn't need a basement probably, but.
yeah.
Is it time for me to throw my Spaniard in the works?
Hold on,
So,
just a-
so do you want to rework E in some way? We don't have to get the exact language tonight if you're not ready for that, but did you want E to be reworked in some way?
Did we want to get rid of the word unnecessary in the first
I
sentence?
think we
Yeah, we
wanted
do.
I
that.
mean, if you just use thoughtful design to limit bedrock removal. I mean, that seems pretty
Clear.
Yeah,
straightforward.
And then you can say how you did it.
Yeah, then the second unnecessary may be a good thing to keep in there, like what you're describing.
so just strike the one unnecessary for the first line. I'm good with that as a change.
So that.
And then if you had talked about in the preamble at the beginning of 8 to talk about in its physical or geographic context. We don't have any objections to that, if that's what you would
I
like to
think
do.
that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah, because they can say, okay, well, if there's not a single other business within 2,000 feet, it's really not a big deal, guys. Like,
that seems good to add, geographic context. Okay, anything else on those ones we already talked about, just to wrap up? It sounds like Michael, you have another new topic.
Yes,
Right, go
which
for it.
was a bit of a joke last time we discussed it, but I did a little bit of digging around. I looked at a sound distance attenuation calculator, and because I think I suggested last time that maybe we could define how much noise is acceptable at and where. And the literature says that the average construction site is 70 to 90 dBA, but chipping is about 120. And so I looked it up, and I calculated at 500 feet and at 250 feet from the point at which the chipping takes place. 100 dBA, 120 dBA would be 66 at 500 feet or 72 at 250 feet. And I'm wondering whether we can't use that, because we already know that the place where the bedrock removal will happen has been planned on the parcel. We know where it is, so we can define the edge of this bedrock removal area and work from there. Is it reasonable to pick 250 feet? That might not be a reasonable number. Might be too far. But there are ways of figuring out what the sound level will be 250 feet from where it's happening, where the 120 dBA is generated.
And that would determine how they would get rid of the bedrock? Which
So-
method?
No, they would have to take other measures to mitigate, perhaps sound barriers or who knows.
Okay.
You know, they do it at the airports with blast balls, but that's a whole different ballgame.
So. You were here in December, we had like a hour discussion about not putting in the decibel levels and I agreed to that. Are you trying to bring that back up? Cause that was a big discussion where we,
I remember it,
Included.
yes. And I think John was very eloquent that it would be almost impossible to do, but maybe it's not so impossible. That's the question I have.
okay,
I never argued it was impossible.
yeah.
In fact, I was arguing the exact opposite. And in fact, that's what I was gonna bring up, it is along the same lines, is I think what we have here is very useful. But I don't think it addresses the initial charge, which was the noise. This is a nice plan, and it could be a nice plan to generate an incredible, intolerable amount of noise for an almost unlimited period of time. It doesn't do anything to control or cap the noise.
Well, that's.
So I think there's something that's missing there. I would be more along the lines of performance standards and max noise at the property line or something like that. But I don't think we've actually done what we've been asked to do if we don't have a limit in here someplace. You know, the de minimis part, there's absolutely no limit at all. They can do whatever they want under the de minimis. And we're counting on them going through this process and voluntarily getting the noise level down to something that's acceptable. And by the nuisance ordinance review memo that we saw earlier this evening, if they get it wrong and the noise is intolerable, too bad.
What's acceptable at a domestic? Is it 85 decibels or is it 70 decibels?
I would suggest, I mean, we've gone around and around on this, and I know I'd like to see some numbers in here. I think Michael would like to see some numbers in here. Clearly, staff is not supportive of that. If we think that that's something that we should do, I would suggest we form a subcommittee and the planning commission look at it and maybe go talk to some folks and write some language. We don't have to put forward what city staff is asking for.
No.
We can add to it, we can modify it, we can send that on to council.
Yep.
But I don't think we're getting any closer to that. Now, if everyone else is okay with this, then
Well, I got closer to it because I knew Sweet were all about it before. Other than it's loud. But now I've done a little bit of digging and looked at, what's reasonable. Or trying to figure out what's reasonable.
Donna?
Well, I don't disagree with Michael on this, but except that the way you're doing the calculations, it's simplifying, so it becomes theoretical. It's not an actual. I mean, you do modeling of a lot of different design parameters and things like that. And so you don't really know how close it's to the reality. And this is, I think, one of those instances where, position, vegetation, all kinds of things can affect what the actual sound would be. But if you wanted to set up a theoretical and said, well, okay, within, 60 decibels within a distance of 250 feet or something like that, it's not that you're going to have somebody out in the field taking measurements to see if they actually comply, but it does give some protection to somebody who is, happens to work at home and has.
It would have to buy a
Has-
DP meter.
Well, yeah, and would, probably be willing to go out and find somebody to take accurate measurements. And then they'd have something to say, okay, this is clearly not in compliance. But it's something, if you want to have something, it's gonna have to be theoretical to the point where, you're not gonna have building inspectors checking this or anything, but it gives somebody a way of making a legitimate complaint about a problem, a nuisance.
What about John's idea of a subcommittee to come up with something that might be workable?
I don't know. Fine.
I guess my hunch is I absolutely hear what Michael and John are both saying about how it would be desirable to get some kind of more performance-based standards, but my gut with what I know about how sound transmits is trying to guess before construction how loud it's going to be is probably infeasible without doing a really in-depth survey, like what materials are in the area, is the rock that can transmit sound underground, like what is your topology, how's walking, so
Trees.
yeah, but like how much tree?
It's site specific.
But if we have a number in there, you will have to do calculations and trying to come up with a good performance-based standard. I would be shocked if a subcommittee could figure it out satisfactorily. Like, this feels like something that's going to need to be hire a consultant, and then it would be like a 100-page long document with tons and tons of exemptions and weird stuff. Like, I just feel that sound is a very complicated topic, and I'm worried if it were easy to, like, if it were as easy as, just set 250-foot buffer, great, I'd be more amenable to that. But I just feel I'm not sure that coming up with performance-based standards is within the resources of a small municipality, and frankly, complying with such regulations that would require a very in-depth site survey to actually model what your site would potentially be like, taking hundreds of borings and stuff like that. Like, I worry this would be also very hard to comply with the level of fidelity you need to make this thing useful would be extremely hard to get, is my concern. It's not like, you put a single light up in the sky of 200 feet, you can pretty accurately model where it's going to be light. This is a very complex problem to model, and that's why I'm a little concerned with the feasibility of making like a bad. I would say, because my opinion is a bad performance-based standard is worse than no performance-based standard, because it's going to lead to arbitrary people being blocked doing stuff. And I'm not sure if we can come up with a good one, is my opinion on the matter. I understand that it's an awkward situation, certainly. I would like there to be a performance standards. I'm just not sure if we can actually get one, is where I'm at.
I just want to agree with one thing that Colin said, because I think there are a lot of people out there who just can't stomach the idea of any construction within view of their home. And that this could, creating something like this could just be an open invitation for everybody to just stop construction and basically, declare war on builders. Because I think there are a number of people like that in our community. So, I've always sort of felt like, we shouldn't establish things that are just inviting somebody to try to stop a development from happening. For no reason, for just because they don't want it there.
Yeah. Duncan?
I think, I remember when you presented the information you got, I think you mentioned that it was incredibly hard to come up with a verifiable standard to defend noise limits. I hear what you're saying, but my concern is kind of what Colin said, is I don't see how could we come up with a standard that was enforceable?
Don't know yet.
Not that I don't disagree with what you guys are saying per se, but I don't know how, based on what staff told us, and again, I'm not saying we just have to completely agree with staff, but
Yes,
I
I think there's
don't
a
see
world of
how-
information out there that staff didn't go look at.
I mean, the staff's conclusion certainly fits with my knowledge from studying physics about how hard it is to model sound.
You don't need to model anything. You're going on and on about modeling. I'm a chemical engineer. I understand all about modeling. There's nothing to model. You say you can't send a noise above this from your property line.
But then
And they need to, and I'm not necessarily saying you set it at 60. You put it at something that says your neighbors have a right not to get blasted off their property. Because you want to improve yours.
But
So what we're saying now is you can make as much noise as you want if you're doing construction and damn the community. It's too complicated for us to try and do anything. And as one of those neighbors who lived through 3 years of this, I can tell you it's not an easy thing. And we're sitting here like, oh, it's only 80 decibels. Do we want to have an 80 decibel hammer going for the entire meeting and see how much work we get done?
I'm not disputing that this absolutely can and has been incredibly disruptive to many members of our community. It's more my concern if you put in a standard for, even if we are just saying, okay, you can't exceed this number, how are they going to know whether or not what their activities are doing would exceed that number? And as we said, it can vary a lot depending on what they're doing, what time of day, exactly what conditions, or do they hit a particularly hard rock? Oh, then bam, the noise spikes up briefly. I worry that even if we are saying like, oh, you can't exceed this level of decibels, unless they literally are monitoring every area around their house on every other property at all times, I don't know how the developer is going to be able to monitor that. And it makes it a little easier too. That I definitely hear in terms of, I get this isn't perfect. This is far from perfect. I just don't see, if developers can't model it, how they're going to have any idea of whether or not they actually can meet this standard. Like, are they going to monitor every single person's house in the neighborhood? I can't see how they do that. And that just becomes a message of, oh, well, I think it's above this decibel. Well, but was it above this decibel for a certain amount of time? Like, it's tricky to measure too.
Helen, you had your hand up?
No, my comment isn't to me anymore.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I just want to ask you a question. So if we put in a limit, how does it get monitored and who enforces that?
In my mind, the developer would be responsible for responding to complaints. So if you've got somebody that's saying, hey, I've taken a measurement now, getting somebody with a certified meter is thousands of dollars. Been there, done that.
So the onus is on the property owner to come. You're saying you would like the onus to be on the property owner, not the developer.
I would like it not to be on the resident who's being impacted by it, to have to spend thousands of dollars to get somebody to come out and take a measurement. I think a standard, and that's one of the reasons I think we need to talk to some people. The Noise Pollution Clearinghouse, which is a Vermont organization, I think might have a lot to say about this, but I'm not sure we talked to them. And I think this has been done before, and I think we can find a way to get a measurement that at least gets you in the ballpark. So if the measurement's 80 at the property line, then if you've got somebody that's saying, well, my iPhone app says that it's 90, well, then you have a legitimate complaint. And then the developer would need to respond to that. Hopefully that will incentivize them to do some things ahead of time to actually mitigate it, not just pencil whip it. Right now, this whole activity just has the developer putting something together and, oh yeah, it's the best we can do. And really, yeah, we balanced it. No, we don't know what the noise is going to be, because it's going to be, but this is the cheapest way for us to do it. And we're going to do it this way, and it's okay because you can't tell us no once you've given us the permit. So they jump through these hoops and we give them a pass to make as much noise as they want. And then the city can say, oh, well, we gave them a permit. There's nothing we can do. Which is largely the response that the Golf Course Road, Butler Farms area has gotten for 4 years. Well, sorry, there's nothing we can do. I'd like to think we could do better.
But I guess bring it back around. I mean, what we are doing, I am confident that how it is written at the moment will avoid a situation with anywhere close to the scale of the impacts. Like, it won't alleviate impacts, but I can't see something like that happening again. How this is written, it won't eliminate it. No, I agree with that. I will not fully eliminate like loud noises coming from chipping, I just, I can't see that happening again with the language stated as, at least certainly on that limit of multiple years running. I can't see that happening again. At least in my opinion, how it's written now. Though I get that is absolutely a subjective opinion. Not like I can't be definitive on that.
Well, this idea of a subcommittee would be looking at not why we can't do it, which I take your point, but how we can do it. You know, I used to run an organization. When I heard that, I would always say the difficulty of this project is not the yardstick by which we will decide to do it or not to do it. It's whether we need it, and we need this.
I don't know that there's agreement that we do need it.
So,
And so, I mean,
I know you aren't gonna solve it tonight.
No, Mike, so what I'm saying is like, we talked about this for multiple meetings and, you know, had come to the conclusion that we didn't need it. Because there were these standards. So. I'm so far.
That's on me that I didn't say this then.
You. I guess, but yeah, so we did talk about it. I'm hearing there's 2 commissioners that are feeling like they really want numbers. There's 7 of us, like,
Mhm.
I'm not convinced that like, this is something we do need. You're making the assumption because you want it. And John's supporting.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, that's not how it works, so. I'm not sure because we, you know, when we had the discussion before, there was a lot of discussion about how. The scenario that I think John lived in is a specific type of scenario. And there's a lot of other scenarios where Bedrock is removed, where like a limit may or may not be appropriate. So I mean, I think that was part of why we wound up with this language where, you know, if you're working on a important new culvert or utility project in the middle of city center, like it's such a very, very different scenario than, you know, the one that we've been really focused on a lot. And, you know, I think John is so that, like, how do you just say, no, you can't put the new culvert in or the new utility line because there's people that live there and now your property lines are right there? I mean, it's not as simple as the specific scenario that the 2 of you are referring to, because that's very specific. You know, in this Bedrock removals, you know, there's a lot of scenarios where, you know, I don't think we want to say you can't do it, you know, because of where the property lines are. So I don't know. I don't know exactly what the answer is, but I don't know that there's full consensus on putting numbers related to property lines, you know, based on our multiple previous discussions. So we don't know.
I mean, there is
You know, usually when we have a subcommittee, it's because like the whole group has decided this is a thing that we all really want to dive deeper into, and then we form a subcommittee. That's been like the previous subcommittee setup.
I mean, there is a legal doctrine which says that I have a right to the peaceful enjoyment of my private property. And we would be infringing that. It is a kind of basic legal it's not how would I describe it? But those are the words generally. And
I guess what I would say is to follow up with what I just said is that usually when we have a subcommittee, it's because the whole group wants to do something, agrees with the premise, and has said we just need more information. I don't know that that's the case. So I think if we do have a subcommittee, I think we need to go into it saying, okay, we're willing to hear more information if people want to work on it, but we're not saying we're gonna adopt it because we're not in, I think there's various opinions on this. So like, I guess I wouldn't want to have a subcommittee do like a whole lot of work and come back and then for us to be like, well, actually it feels like it doesn't fit or, you know, so I think there's premise there, because it's not at this point, everybody saying this is a thing we're all on board with. This is, it'd be more information maybe to consider. So I guess that's one thing.
Well, as you said, there appeared to
And
be
then
two of us who feel strongly about
And
it.
then I think
I don't
to
know.
have a
Anybody else?
subcommittee, we need to have some kind of vote to actually create a subcommittee. And do we need three?
You would mean 4. What do you mean 3
If
what?
we, three people
A
have a
subcommittee?
subcommittee, we have
Um,
an official, we've usually had 3 people to have a subcommittee.
you can set it up how you choose. I would say that the guidance that we have concerning open meeting law is that if there's gonna be substantive conversation for more than, meeting once or twice to sort of look into a thing, that really is a meeting subject to the open meeting law. It would need to be under 4 people, but you probably want 3 because 2 is 2 people talking to each other. It's hard to have sort of brainstorming at 2.
But a subcommittee of 2 could second experts, right?
I don't think I know what the word second means.
Have them, have them join the subcommittee. Some, a construction company representative, for example, or somebody.
You mean
from-
invite? Or do you mean invite or sit on?
Invite to help, to provide information.
And that's up to the commission in setting up a subcommittee is what guidelines you want to give them. So that's up to you all.
Do we need a straw poll for a subcommittee, or do we need a straw poll as to whether we're comfortable with this and let it go on?
What do you mean, what do you mean by the second point?
We agree with it and to move it forward.
Oh, the two options.
Yeah, yeah,
Strong.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we would definitely need like a full actual vote to have the subcommittee. But,
I think we probably need a vote regardless.
you would?
We need a vote saying we do or we don't want a subcommittee, it sounds at this point.
Oh, yeah. I mean-
Yeah,
Well, procedurally, you only would need a vote to do a thing. You don't have a subcommittee now. You don't need to vote to not have a thing that you don't already have.
I guess what I'm saying is there are
Just
members on the
change.
commission that would like to have a firm answer on
Okay.
this is.
Well, yeah, Duncan, I think what you're saying is if we have a straw poll to see if there's even interest.
Yeah.
And we would probably need at least 3 people to be interested in like serving on it also, so. Okay, so, so Michael or John, one of you brought up the idea of a subcommittee, you did. Okay, so we're gonna do a straw poll, which is non-binding, but just to gauge if there's interest in John's idea of having a straw poll to kind of flush out the idea of decibel levels and distances. It's the gist of it.
Subcommittee, not a football.
So we're gonna do the straw poll in support of the sub. Okay, so who's in favor of having the subcommittee as suggested? Take more time to vote.
Hmm?
Feel like we might have some people on the, okay, so in favor, aye. Who's in favor? You can raise your hand.
Of creating.
Of creating the
Wait, is that a
subcommittee.
vote now or a straw poll?
It's still a straw poll, but I just saw a lot of like,
Glaze-
indecision,
Glazed over.
indecision.
Yeah.
Can we make a statement?
Okay, we
Who's in
have
favor of?
2 straw poll yeses and you can make a statement.
Well, I mean, I think it's an important conversation, and I think the public, or at least some people in the public, would have comfort in having numbers in this LDR. I guess I certainly am not I guess have the background to be very helpful on a subcommittee. So if you need 3 people, I'm not one of them, so someone else would have to say, oh yeah, that's kind of an area where I have some information. I also think what we've put together put some pretty good, safeguards or balances or, you know, structure around future bedrock removal that I think addresses some of the concerns or the possibility of what happened in the past of not happening again. But there's no guarantee of that. I mean, there certainly can be developers who take advantage of things and, you know, don't behave as we all might want them to, or would be sensitive to neighbors. I mean, I really would like this to go forward initially, and I don't know if having a subcommittee come back with some numbers would make any of us comfortable enough to say, oh yeah, you nailed it, that's the number. I mean, to me, it's almost kind of like, so how much bedrock can you remove? I mean, we don't, it's so different given whatever the development might be, I think. I mean, if it's.
Yeah, it's very site specific.
It is very site specific, and I find that that's what's hard. That's like spot zoning, you know? It's really hard to accomplish and have it stand up to legal challenge. So I'm
Yeah.
really like on the fence. I mean, I don't know, it would be great if there was some real easy way to do that, but you know, I sat through a lot of information about the F-35s and that noise, and it's just a really challenging thing to measure and then
But they did,
stop. Pardon me?
they did measure. They have a 65 decibel.
Yes, and there's lots of people who, well, whatever, I mean, there were
Yeah,
different methodologies that were used, and not everyone agreed with those methodologies, I guess. I will say that, but
There's a lot of people who are still quite unhappy with the F-35. Yeah.
yeah. But, you know, so.
Donna?
Yeah, I'd just like to see what effect what we've already done has, before we go ahead and, you know, try to define something that we know is gonna be very difficult to define. But, you know, I think we've made some improvements already. I would love to have a specific number if it was possible to do, but it just sounds like it's gonna be very difficult to do. And because it does invite people to, you know, who are anti-development, it just gives them another tool, I think. I'm just kind of leery about going that way.
One quick question, I guess, John, maybe just to clarify, you mentioned earlier that some of the language was precluding using the nuisance ordinance as an alternate measure. Can you point to what language you're referring to there?
The first memo, the previous agenda item,
mm.
staff went to
Yeah.
council and talked to them about the impact of this ordinance, and it
Have
doesn't
a legal-
strictly preclude it, but basically having this ordinance in place and giving a permit under this ordinance, which recognizes and evaluates the noise level, would make it exceedingly difficult for the city to then take the developer to court and say, you have violated a standard that we never set using a permit that we gave you that essentially said you can make a lot of noise. It would make it extremely difficult for the city to, please jump in if I'm incorrectly paraphrasing.
I don't think it's incorrect, but it does, it maybe ignores the fact that by creating the standard that we have here, it front loads a lot of review that wouldn't exist if this standard doesn't exist. So it creates
Absolutely.
the opportunity for the public to weigh in at a DRB hearing or by the appeals process that exists under zoning, which is much more detailed and requires a lot more effort and offers a lot more opportunity for public input than any kind of enforcement of the nuisance ordinance.
Yeah, okay, well, thanks, that was to clarify that.
Yeah, that was.
I mean, I'll be also honest, from a personal level, I don't have a ton of faith in nuisance ordinance anyways, given that I've made multiple nuisance ordinance requests about certain things that nothing ever came to the cops just didn't care.
Enforcement. Lack of enforcement.
Yeah, but again, that's,
Capacity.
yeah, that is already a thing, I guess, more, but that's gonna be tangent, and we don't need to go into that.
So we have a public comment. You wanna go ahead?
Yeah, my opinion is, I have this opinion that you have a delicate balancing act to perform here. And if you lean too much one way, you will attract attention from the business community, and they will go to Montpelier, and it's a Dillon rule state. And they'll probably pass an executive order or some legislation to override it. So I just want you to keep that in mind. That's a possibility, and not that that's gonna happen if you were to lean too hard, with certain standards. Not that it would backfire, but then it would become moot because they would just override it. Whereas if you find that sweet spot in the middle, that was like a really good compromise for everybody and prevents what happened, at Long Drive over 3 summers, that probably is the best solution.
Sort of what happened with the building standards, I guess. Like with the new update, like that bills all got completely mooted because they were a bit too far and now way back. And the whole thing got tossed out. I'm sorry, speaking aloud.
What about changing course a little bit and then focusing more on mitigation? Rather, because then not much here. I mean, unfortunately, some of the mitigation measures that I read about are expensive because they have to buy sound absorbing fencing, if you like. But I don't know what it would cost in bulk, but 8 by 10 sheets cost $90 of sound absorbing material. Is there enough about mitigation in here? And would it?
It's mentioned.
Hmm?
It's mentioned. It would encourage them to address that in their application.
So in terms of mitigation, a couple of key things that have been modified from the last draft was at your request, it says that blasting is preferred over chipping. So that is a statement that you asked to be specifically says that that's the priority. That's the first one. And then I think, John, you had pointed out that under 8B that it appeared as though the suggestion of sound blocking methods was applying to blasting. So we try to make it more explicit that that is holistically for all subjects. So those are the 2 areas on that specific question that that there are modifications to the text.
So our straw poll didn't have a lot of votes, unless somebody's looking to change their mind.
You want to check?
I love when we have unsuccessful votes. Even if it's so I think at this point, I'm not hearing a lot of support for kind of going down
It's still
that
too
road.
good.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I won't keep at it
Yes.
on the side.
Yes.
Yeah.
I appreciate your diligence. Okay,
What's next?
other items, and it used to look like you still have a list there.
Oh, I just had a question about the required notification. I thought it should be required notification of the city, abutters and other properties in the immediate vicinity, because abutters should be sort of the primary people to be notified.
And
that they're likely to be the ones most affected.
your suggestion is to add that as a,
Just that language in,
as one of the conditions under, that the DRB or administrative officer may impose.
under, it's number C, G1C.
there you go.
So like specifically use the word abutters, because right now it just says properties in the immediate vicinity, which is maybe less clear.
Properties in the immediate vicinity is broader than abutters.
No, I'm saying abutters and other properties in the vicinity.
Makes no functional difference to the language, but if it makes it clearer to you, then that's fine.
Oh, no,
You can put the word abutters in there. Fine.
Doesn't Act 250 use the term abutters
Abutters is a legal term that's used all over the
for
place.
notification? Yeah.
Yeah.
In this context, exactly what does immediate vicinity? Is that adjacent property, is that abutters,
So the
adjacent property owners, or?
way this is, oh, go ahead.
No, the idea, this is in the section of something that the DRB can impose these conditions. So the idea is that it's written in a more broad way, so that if it's a large project that's proposing to do a ton of blasting, it may be abutters and then 3 more properties. And that would be a determination that the DRB can impose as the condition. If you, normally, an application is notice to the abutters. So this is giving them actually a broader scope to require notice to farther away things, depending on things like topography and amount of removal and all of that stuff.
So one reason that you might want to keep it as written is, let's say it's the airport. The airport's abutters are the entire 700 acres of the airport. It could be the other end of the runway. It may be irrelevant on that side, but it may be relevant for the board to say all of Shunpike Road as a neighborhood, which is not abutters, but are maybe the immediate vicinity that says the end of the airport, should be notified. So it gives a little more less mechanical, more thoughtful as to the where does it need to go.
No, I was
Notifying-
suggesting that you would leave out in the vicinity.
Right, but adding a butters does mean in the instance of, let's say, the airport, that it's gotta be, Burrard Drive has to be notified of something 4,000 feet away at the other end of it. But also, this is in the context of what the DRB may do, so ultimately, it's a may anyway.
Okay.
Other language items from anyone?
Well, there was a question from thoughts. K,
Was that on this or something else?
page 16 of the,
I think that's in
Is
the.
it
I think that's
item.
the next item.
yeah,
Oh, I thought we were gonna finish this up.
Yeah, let's stick to the bedrock spot and stuff first, so. Anything else on the bedrock?
Sorry, just so that we are doing exactly what you wanted, what did you want to do about the abutters?
leave that, give it up.
And then you had a typo in there that we
That you
will address.
I mean,
Just bring it to light. There was a missing.
it's just a missing word in section E15. It's a minor correction, should be, it's a sentence, I'll go back to.
Yeah, it's
Just the word is missing, the consonant, the preposition is missing.
Okay, we might be at the end here. Are we ready to move on to nonconformities?
Yes.
Okay, let's move on to number 6, nonconform.
so before you do that, just so that we are clear, we've got a few corrections to do in here that you gave guidance on. Do you want to see it again before you take action? Do you want to just leave it there, and when you vote for things with other parts of it, you've been voting to say include it in the next round? We just want to make sure that we are delivering what you need out of this, rather than just moving on to the next topic.
Yeah, okay.
if
Do we
You
need to
don't
see
have
it
to take
back?
action tonight,
before
but when you,
we- Well, we would need to see it back before we take action or like warrant a hearing, but you mean just put it in with the next, the other items?
with other ones, you have said, with the changes incorporated this evening, please include this in the next round of amendments. As an action for you, so that we have guidance that that's where you want to be going. If you are
yeah,
not prepared to
no,
do
I
that,
see.
that is totally fine. We just want to,
Yeah, let's do that, cause that means it's like moving forward. We need a motion for that.
I move that Paul needs to repeat what he said just a moment ago.
Whatever Paul said.
I think I said, that with the, changes decided upon or agreed upon this evening to the draft as presented, that it would be included in the next round of amendments. You will ultimately see a full package before you vote on it, but it is direction to us to say, please include it.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor of including in the next round? Edits. Aye. Okay, that was unanimous. Thank you for the wrap up there. Okay, number 6, looking at the nonconformities, adaptive reuse and alternative compliance. Including our policy direction from back in November. We did have quite a detailed memo on this. So, are folks ready to just kind of jump into possible language changes? Did you have anything you wanted to?
No, I was just gonna say if there's any, understanding questions, conceptual questions from the memo, like topic. Wait a second, this would be the time to do that, and then you can work on into the language. I think generally speaking, the policies, you all gave direction on the other November 12th meeting. I summarized them in those couple of bullets towards the top. And then there's some edits, a lot of the edits in the language deal with those, and then some edits are instead kind of clean up language that connects those changes to other pieces, because as with everything, you pull one string and the whole thing kind of needs to be put back together again. So most edits are directly in response to those policy changes, and then any other edits that you see as little one-offs are cleaning up some of those references, places where the wrong standard is repeated, things like that.
And you had asked whether K, non-conforming use of land with no structure, K2.
So that was inadvertently included in the packet. That's a note from Paul to me about changing potentially that standard. We looked at that later and decided not to touch that standard. We're primarily looking in this round because our project charge and project scope is about reuse of buildings. So the primary focus was the adaptive reuse that ends up being that section towards the bottom, and then also continued use and investment in structures that are on properties. So that one is just a little bit outside of that scope. So we didn't sort of follow that trail down. It's something that we could consider in the future, but it's not something that we're considering in this round of amendments.
Okay, because I thought that could be deleted because it's the same as basically the same as the next item 3.
Yeah, we didn't look at it in detail for its technical merit. We just decided it was something that was not part of the scope of this project because we were talking more about structures and non-conforming structures and what they can be used or reused for. So that's something that kind of where we drew the line between this project and another one. So for now, it's just going to remain.
Just leave.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
you did get the bonus of a little peek inside how we internally look at stuff.
Yeah, and how
Love it.
PDF, Microsoft Word and PDFing things tricks me and occasionally keeps little nuggets like that. I usually catch it, but not this time. January is hard.
Apart from that, I just had a question about the last item, L.
Yeah.
Why do we set a a 15-year.
Yeah,
Ask that same question.
yeah,
Where did
that
that
is,
come from?
so that's not something that we discussed specifically, but the concept being, this came out of a discussion that I had with our city attorneys. City attorney, deputy attorney, on the legality of this and the legal sort of basis for it. What we are trying to do, and specifically the 15 years comes out of Los Angeles and their adaptive reuse standards. As opposed to 10 years or 20 years, 15 is their number, so I stole it. The idea being if you build something and then 2 years later you decide like, hey, I did this, I'm now gonna use it to like as a entryway into doing something that's further non-conforming. The rules change for some reason and it's not really an old building, it's not really a historic building, it's not really a building that's been sort of part of the fabric of the area for a reasonable amount of time. It's just a building that you could use to kind of get around the rules. That was their sort of, what they saw as the benefit of that kind of time limit. 15 years in the age of a building is not that long. I would say most buildings in our, general vicinity right here, barring the ones next to us and the ones we're sitting in and that one, are older than 15 years. Just, 15 years was 2010 or 2011, as upsetting as that statistic might be. So that was the theory, is that you couldn't sort of do a thing and sneak in a structure before you hear rumblings about a change in the rules or something. You sneak in your structure and then 2 years later you're like, haha, I can adapt or reuse it into whatever, into the housing that I wanted to do, even though I've changed the rules.
And
It's a very niche case, but it also reflects the general policy that the idea of adaptive reuse is that you are not making someone tear down a building that is otherwise kind of part of the fabric of the area. And about 15 years is when people start thinking, that's the theory anyway, that people start thinking like, oh, that's always been here, or that's just part of the neighborhood, part of the, commercial area, part of this part of the city.
It's also well into
Psychologically.
when somebody wouldn't build a speculative building
Yeah,
just to wait for the rules to change, right? 15
It
years
would
to
be-
carry an empty building would be a very.
that is a long game that I don't think most developers would be intentionally doing. Anything under 5 is not that long in the scope of building a development. 15 years seemed to be a pretty good number to kind of hit the policies we want to hit without the likely very rare scenario that someone would do something sneaky. It just puts something in there and puts a stake in the ground about when is a building integrated into the community enough that we would want to keep it or allow it to be kept, I guess.
Donna?
The section that I sort of raised some questions with me had to do with the E or F, damage to non-conforming structures. And is the new item 2. And it kind of makes sense, but then, in places where there has been rather extensive damage in communities, like especially out in California, and you realize how long it takes to get something done. I think applying for the application in 6 months, I mean, it seems reasonable. Well, it's 6 months and having to do with fire inspections and stuff like that. But then getting it complete within 18 months, I think, the 6 months seems reasonable. How long it takes to complete things these days, it can be kind of out of an owner's control over how long it actually takes to get something complete. So I was wondering if that might be a little too restrictive.
So we did look at this and we did extend it. It was previously tighter than this because the 6 months and the 18 months were being measured from earlier points in the process.
Yeah.
We landed on 18 months as being from the date of the zoning permit approval. And the zoning permit approval is what you get immediately before you start building something. All of the infrastructures, if it's building infrastructure or rebuilding any infrastructure, all that sort of is there. The zoning permit is that last permitting point that we have. So some of the delays that come in materials or in city permitting or site plan or whatever it is that may have delays up to that point are not included in that 18 months. The other thing is that we changed it to the submission of the application within 6 months, not the beginning of reconstruction, with the acknowledgement that
Right.
that's probably about as long as it would take to get zoning permits to
The
redevelop.
first part seemed fine.
Yeah, so we
18
did,
months,
we did extend it out.
18 months seems like maybe that still could be tight in some situation.
Yeah.
Particularly for larger buildings,
Yeah,
you know, because
understood.
larger buildings, I mean.
To be completely transparent, and when we do some of the work like this in some of the LDRs, we are trying to update the language with this little policy change as possible. So changing sort of where those points are that the times are measured from, updated it a bit. But if the commission wants to extend that to, 24 months or something else, that would also be fine. I would think, well, zoning permits expire, so that's already
So you have
built
to
in
start within
within a year.
a year.
So that's
Starting
already-
year is the easy part, it's
That's-
finishing in 18
Right,
months.
so that's already built in,
Yeah.
so we
I mean,
could,
I think we'd be happy to extend it, just sort of in terms
Yeah.
of how we got to here. We were looking at the adjacent section
Mhm.
and then saw, oh my gosh, it says that you must reconstruct within
6 months.
6 months of the fire, which is just
Impossible.
people are waiting to hear about whether they're gonna get,
Insurance.
insurance from Irene, right? So that's how we got into this subject at all. So we're open to additional tweaks.
Isn't it 18 months within a 3-year period though?
So this is a subsection where Donna's talking about damage to a structure after a fire.
Yeah.
Or damage to, could be flood too.
Well, flood
Well-
has separate
Right. So-
stuff.
Is this
The
specific to
other-
fire?
No, it's force majeure, meaning things outside of your control.
Yeah, so
Right.
that was the other thing that was unclear that we cleared up. It previously said
By any means.
dream damaged by any means to an extent greater, and I went, oh no.
Implied in there but not stated was not like.
Implied was you don't just go knock it down yourself, but it didn't say that, so we cleaned that up, that it was something outside your control happens, the proverbial act of God. That's, force majeure is the legal term for act of God, effectively, so
Oh.
something happens.
But the flood is a good one, because like you said, I mean,
Mhm.
there's people waiting many, many years for FEMA, but is that covered under
This
the
is-
flood specific regulation?
They wouldn't have done the permit if they weren't approved by FEMA, I'd assume.
Oh, okay, that's a good point. So it could have an empty period for a long time in between.
Could you, with FEMA money, and I admit I don't know exactly the mechanics of this, if you got money from FEMA, could you rebuild in exactly the same place? Or are you restricted from building in the area that was affected by a flood?
I think this is actually covered in our flood reg
Mhm.
chapter.
Yeah,
There's
there's
like
a
a
separate section
percent
on floods.
damage,
State
yeah.
of Vermont is
Yeah.
good examples of that in Montpelier, because they obviously aren't gonna move the buildings, but they have to move all of the equipment out of the ground floors. And move it up to the second floor,
I think the
and this
The flood
has
section,
this has
that's
been a
right, is
long
usually
time
separate.
coming, and they still don't know
My
what they're
understanding,
gonna do.
I'm not an expert, my understanding of it is it's pretty restricted what you can get built. I mean, there are buildings in the hurricane area that have rebuilt but dozens of times on the same site because they can't. Maybe this changed recently, but I've definitely heard that is an issue that is very restricted what you can do with money.
Right,
Um,
right.
But I
Well,
haven't.
it's city by city, so ours is specific, and we do talk about substantial damage and rebuilding in a spot or not. It is actually covered, it's just in a different section. For the properties that are flooded that are in the FEMA zones,
I'll talk about FEMA reconstruction funds
this-
specifically.
yes, and then, oh,
My understanding is there's strings attached to what you can use the money for.
are separate from our regulation.
Okay, maybe I might be
Yeah,
misunderstanding the
that makes
question. Yeah.
But I think there is a scenario where the force major is water, but isn't covered by the FEMA zone because it's like you could have flooding in a spot that's not in a FEMA zone.
Right.
So I think it's good to keep it broad here.
So is there direction from the commission to extend the 18 months or change the goalpost from where the 18 months is measured?
24 months from zoning
From
permit
zoning
feels a bit more reasonable
Yeah.
to me.
I'd say, you know.
Yep.
We moved it a little bit more in the reasonable direction.
Yeah, 2 years to finish construction is.
One very important thing that is in this specific section is we removed the cap on. We proposed to remove the cap on the value associated with it. Because in the costs of construction now, that is completely irrelevant. So for example, there was a fire just recently on a condo on Dorset Street. We just got the zoning permit in. The zoning permit for rebuilding is for repair of the damage is about the same as the value of the unit. And that's just what it is. So the whatever was in the standard before that talked about 50% of the value of
Yeah.
market value,
The
it's
assessment.
it's irrelevant anymore. So that's why that's gone to just get to you can rebuild under certain circumstances. So we just want to make sure that you're aware of that.
Right.
Why did we include also that the walls being load bearing?
You wanna answer that about the removing the wall?
Yeah, so so this is on to this back to the subject of like when is it
Voluntary reconstruction.
right? So this is back on voluntary. When does it count as being still a nonconformity? So this is something that there was a lot of discussion on, and Michael, you may remember this back when the form-based code was adopted. When the form-based code first came in, essentially every building in all of city center became a nonconformity. There was a lot of discussion about when do you consider the building to still be existing and not? And we had a couple of circumstances where there was advocacy for things that would sound very silly. So, there was one example where prior to form-based code adopting, there was an entity that really wanted to keep the parking in front of the building. And so they proposed, what if we took all the building all the way down until the vertical columns were 6 inches off the ground? Can we keep that? Can that still be the building?
Well, the building was everything.
They would tear everything down
Tear it
except they
down.
would keep 6 inches of the columns in the building.
To say it was still a building, so they could keep.
So
the
it's like a
non-conforming.
rooftop parking, kind of.
No, it was
No,
to
they just
rebuild the
wanted-
structure in the
They
same
want to
place.
rebuild the structure in the same place and not have to build the building up the street.
Oh, okay.
And so there was a lot of discussion in saying, well, there is an inherent cost to redevelopment that, the water lines, the sewer lines, the infrastructure underground, that's expensive stuff. So there needs to be sort of a point where it's fair to say you can do modifications to a building. It's still non-conformity. At what point have you made such an investment in the building that it is reasonable and fair to say whatever you've got sunk in your underground infrastructure is no longer relevant? And so that's where that 50% came from. If you were taking down 50% of the things that are holding up the building, you're not a building anymore. You don't get the protection of being considered non-conforming. So
So we're
that's
defining this in a thesis, basically.
again.
We're defining this ship of thesis.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I had to think about my high school description, but yes, there's a point at which the amount of what you're doing physically
Yeah.
is no
And the
longer
load bearing is doing the weird, what the heck is a wall?
right. And this isn't about
Yeah.
repair, it's about
Yeah,
taking
yeah,
out.
okay.
Making a decision to take.
Yeah, was the word load bearing made it feel like there's some weird hole in there, which there was clearly.
Right,
Yeah.
which is distinguishing from partitions within a building that are irrelevant, right? Those are walls, but they're not. They don't
Yeah, you can
hold anything.
reorganize them as much as you like, and who cares?
Right, more discussion on this item? I think if folks are feeling comfortable, we could do the potential motion to,
Accept as written and move it to our.
File.
our next set of amendments
Well, with one change, right?
with,
24 months.
with the one change.
24 months. Yeah, I heard from 2 commissioners, is that if I say, is that the general, can I have some head nods?
Yep.
What do you think?
Okay, I'm not hearing any more discussions. I think we could do that motion.
Don't all
Maybe
jump
both.
on
That's-
that.
So what's the language for
It's in
this?
the memo.
Oh, okay then.
I wrote just in case. Need some help, memo motion.
I move to include the amendment to Article 3.15 related to adaptive reuse in the next set of amendments to the land development regulations. And to consider warning these changes to Article 3.15 with a set of amendments, reserving the right for potential small edits to the language at that time and incorporating the slight change of
The
18
edit.
months or the edit
Yeah.
to 24 months.
I second that.
Right, any discussion? Yeah, all in favor? Aye. That was unanimous. We have the minutes of December 2nd.
I'll move approval as presented.
I'll second,
Oh, I guess one minor correction.
that's fine.
My name spelled with a U in it, not W, LAURENCE.
Fair enough.
What's
That
Okay.
would be.
It took them a while to get my name.
Yeah.
Spelled properly too.
Oh, you take exception to me.
It's not REALL.
It's confusing them.
True.
Okay, okay, on track here. Any other edits? Could we just accept with that one edit?
Yeah.
Okay. All in favor with the one edit?
Aye.
Okay, unanimous. Okay, under other business, we added, so we had gotten the update from Councilor Barrett that the capital budget program passed. Technically, we got a memo which gave us some information about the process. They were supposed to tell us about the warning 15 days ahead, but they forgot and they apologized. But I mean, I think we got in our emails like lots of information about the warning and it seems like it was reasonably warned and
Except
we all
for
knew about
apology.
it, so. So I don't personally feel like we have any kind of action to take. Like, I think it was well warned and they've acknowledged that they forgot to tell us, which I think is reasonable.
What we would appreciate is a motion to accept the to acknowledge receipt of the communication.
Okay.
That way we're just
Um,
tying up that
perfect.
you're aware that it happened, you're aware that you got a communication, you're not making a value judgment about it, you're just aware of it.
Okay, so I would like to make a motion to acknowledge receipt of the correspondence on the 2027 to 36 capital budget and program.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Unanimous?
I didn't see it because I still have difficulty getting emails.
Oh,
From
okay,
the
so we had, are you abstaining?
I'm abstaining.
Okay, so
I
it's
didn't
6,
see it.
so it passes and 1 abstention. And then any other business? Okay, then we can adjourn. Thank you, everyone, for a very good, robust discussion.